In 1976, Queen Elizabeth II sent the first royal email. It was sent over ARPANET 7 years before the internet was invented and along 13 years before the first recorded internet hack. Almost 50 years later, email is a popular communication method and the most popular vehicle for threat actors to initiate their attacks. Let's go even further back in history to the lives of queens across the globe and see how their actions resemble some of the royal threat campaigns seen by Checkpoint Research in 2022. Wu Zetian, born in the 7th century, was the only empress in history to rule China by herself without a husband or child to share the crown. But it didn't come without a price. She started as a concubine or a lesser wife for the emperor and had an affair with his son. When the father died, she married the son, becoming his concubine. She is said to have killed her own daughter, blamed it on the emperor's main wife, which led to the emperor executing wife and promoting Wu to be his main wife, the empress. She then exiled her brothers, poisoned her sister and her niece for having affairs with the emperor, framed her cousins for the poisoning, then executed them, poisoned her son after speaking ill of her, killed her other son after someone said he's unfit to rule, arrested his wife and had her starved to death. When her husband died, her last son became emperor, but she forced him off of throne and declared herself single ruler. She ordered her grandson to commit suicide for criticizing her. She then killed her lover after he burned her temples and then used his ashes in the temple's rebuilding. Clearly, Empress Wu liked to work alone. She did things her own way, eliminating enemies, but also friends and family on her way to the top. Threat actors are also often thought of as lone wolves, coding and attacking alone in the dark. But like China has evolved since Wu's time, so has the profession of threat actors. And today, they can't do it all alone and have to work in teams. In February 2022, the internal correspondence of a cybercrime group called Conti was leaked, giving a unique and fascinating view into the threat group operation. Checkpoint Research studied the hundreds of thousands of instant messages sent between the threat actors to better understand the group's goals, tactics, and most interestingly, internal politics. Our study shows that the Conti Group is very much like any other tech startup or even any royal household. There are managers, there's an HR department, a hiring process, offices, salaries, and bonus payments. On the tech side, there are individuals dedicated to code, cryptography, QA, sysadmins, reverse engineers, attackers, and customer success engineers who negotiate with victims. See the recruiting process, for example. Many companies use headhunters to get candidate resumes. Conti, as fit for a hacking group, hacked the database of a Russian headhunting company to find CVs and contact candidates. They also have a referral bonus of an extra monthly salary for bringing in a friend. There's an oiled compensation mechanism where members get either bonuses or fines based on their performance. Surprisingly, they even come to the office. We saw the threat actors talking about expenses on the physical offices and renovation as the office doors were painted. Conti, which later got rebranded and members merged into other groups, was one of the most successful ransomware groups in the last couple of years, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can see that, like Wu Zetian, they killed the competition. But Conti's success can probably be contributed to its teamwork, where every subject matter expert contributes to the group's achievements. Cleopatra was the queen or pharaoh of Egypt in the years 51 until 30 before the Common Era. When her father died, he left the kingdom for her and her 10-year-old brother to share. Like most siblings, the two didn't get along, but this rivalry over who would wear the crown got escalated and led Egypt to a civil war. Egypt was a Roman client state, and so Cleopatra appealed to the Roman general Julius Caesar for help. During his visit to Egypt, she wrapped herself in a carpet and smuggled into Caesar's hotel room. When she left the room, Cleopatra had a crown on her head and Caesar's baby in her womb. She pulled a similar trick on another Roman general, Marcus Antonius. dressing up as Greek goddess Aphrodite for their first meeting. This relationship resulted in Antonius supporting Egypt in its battle against Rome, Cleopatra supporting Antonius in the Roman Civil War, and in 3 babies. We see how the Egyptian kingdom and the Roman Empire were frenemies. Cleopatra wanted to keep Egypt independent and her ruling over it, while the Romans needed Egypt's financial aid. The relations are perceived differently when analyzing their different layers. Moving back to today, how do you decide if 2 countries are in peace or in war? The answer is not always very straightforward, as there may be different layers to the story. For example, they can publicly declare being allies, but then quietly attack each other in the cyberspace. March 2022. Employees in Rostec, a Russian state-owned defense conglomerate, doing research on radio electronics, receive an email. Allegedly from the Russian Health Ministry, the email is titled, "Persons under US sanctions for invading Ukraine." At the same time, an entity in Belarus also receives an email from the Russian Health Ministry discussing deadly pathogens in Belarus and suggesting US is spreading a biological weapon in the country. In both cases, the emails included malicious links, which led to Word documents that downloaded external templates with code embedded in them. The code ran a loader, which loaded an encrypted backdoor, providing full access to the machine, enabling threat actors to download additional code and steal information from the victims. Who would attack a Russian state-owned defense company and an unknown company in Belarus in such targeted attack? In 2022, a few options come to mind, but the actual answer is surprising. Developed since at least March 2021, the malware has different patterns that resemble techniques used by no other than Chinese nation-state groups. For example, techniques trying to evade detection and complicate the malware's analysis, such as DLL sideloading and compiler-level obfuscations like control flow flattening. We can't pinpoint the specific group, as Chinese APTs often share tools. But this attack sure sounds like it could be Chinese industrial espionage. This would be in line with the fact that several Russian scientists were arrested in recent years for espionage to China. In the 2,000 years that passed since Egypt's last pharaoh, geopolitics haven't become any less complicated, and some shady politics that were saved for private chambers back then are now being handled on the cyber dimension, hoping to stay unnoticed. 1785, 4 years before the French Revolution. Queen Marie Antoinette says, "S'il n'y a pas de pain, qu'il mange de la brioche." If there is no bread, let them eat cake. Except she didn't really say that, but it conveys the atmosphere of those days. And there's another plot unjustifiably being tied to her name: the affair of the Queen's necklace. A necklace worth $15 million, which Marie's husband offered to buy her, but she refused as it was too extravagant. A criminal group that included a con artist, her lover, and a prostitute sent letters to some cardinal saying the Queen is in love with him and wants him to be a middleman in buying the necklace for her without her name being tied to the purchase. The letters were signed by Marie Antoinette of France. The cardinal, not knowing French royals only sign with their given names and excited about the Queen's show of trust and affection, bought the jewelry. By the time he realized the Queen had nothing to do with it, the con artist got the necklace and sold its diamonds in the Paris and London black markets. But a good scandal is better than the truth, and the public took the affair of the Queen's necklace to be yet another so-called evidence to the Queen's spending of public funds, slowly leading to the revolution, her arrest, and eventually her execution by guillotine. To this day, a false signature is often used by cyber con artists in their work. Here's an example where threat actors exploited the digital signature mechanism of files signed by Microsoft to infect victims with Zloader. Zloader is a banking malware that implements web injection techniques to steal information that is typed into the browser by the user, such as username and password for their bank accounts. These campaigns usually target specific geographies as they need to adapt the injection techniques to the relevant bank's websites. In this campaign, for example, victims were mostly in the US and Canada. The threat actor took over machines using a legitimate remote management software. Then, they used mshta.exe a native Microsoft executable to execute a DLL called app resolver. The DLL is also signed by Microsoft, and it's the DLL that allows Windows to know which application opens which file extension. But this innocent-looking DLL magically downloads and runs the Zloader malware. How? This is the original app resolver, and this is its digital signature. In its metadata, it mentions the length of the signature. The threat actors appended their malicious code to the signature, adjusted the length in the metadata, and voila, the file becomes malicious, the signature stays valid. Sounds like a vulnerability, wouldn't you say? Others thought so as well, registering 3 different related CVEs starting 2012. Microsoft fixed it in 2013, but then turned it into a non-default configuration the next year, as, in their words, impact to existing software could be high. Fun fact: following our publication, VirusTotal changed the way they authenticate executable files so they can identify when a signature was forged using this method. The signed tag was even removed from the file we analyzed, which had been marked as signed back then. So, a digital signature, like a handwritten one, should theoretically confirm the file originated from the signer and has not been altered. But just like the signature of the last Queen of France was used to steal diamonds, Zloader also forged the signature to infect victims, get their banking credentials, and steal money out of their bank accounts. We're in the 16th century. Mary, Queen of Scots, is imprisoned by her cousin, Protestant Queen Elizabeth I, who is threatened by Mary and her Catholic supporters, fearing they will try to take her throne. So she locks Mary in a castle, could be worse, for 18 years, looking for ways to prove she is plotting against her, to murder and also inherit. And proof she found. To communicate with her Catholic supporters, Mary was using encrypted messages hidden in beer barrels. The encryption method was substitution, simple replacement of letters with characters, where some important words and names get characters of their own. But Queen Elizabeth had a team of linguists who were able to decipher the messages. They looked for patterns and symbol frequency to crack the code. For example, the most common symbol would stand for the most common English letter, E. Anyway, they intercepted and read Mary's letters, found proof she was plotting to kill Elizabeth, and Mary was sentenced to death and beheaded the next day. Over 400 years later, encryptography has greatly advanced. Its usage has greatly advanced as well. Not only is it used to hide messages from a third party, it's also used to hide it from, well, its owners. This is, of course, what threat actors do in ransomware attacks: lock our data behind encryption walls and ask us to pay to get the key. In 2022, 1 out of every 13 organizations was affected by ransomware. The most targeted verticals were education, government, and healthcare. These attacks usually started with either a malicious email or entering through a vulnerable server. We all remember how ransomware attacks evolved from attacking individuals to companies, but this year they did something new: attack and extort countries, threatening to interfere with citizens' daily lives. In April, a criminal group named Conti breached and encrypted the data of at least 27 Costa Rica government agencies, including ministries of finance, labor, science, social security, and more. Taxes couldn't be collected, salaries to public sector employees couldn't be paid. Costa Rica's president declared a state of national emergency, later announcing the country was at war with Conti. After Costa Rica declared they would not pay the ransom, the group publicly called the citizens to organize rallies and replace the government. In parallel, Conti attacked government entities in Peru. And in July, government services in Albania were targeted by an Iranian-backed threat group named Homeland Justice, with both ransomware and wipers. Following this attack, Albania cut its diplomatic relations with Iran. In August, a ransomware group named Cuba attacked government entities and critical infrastructure in Montenegro, including electricity, water systems, transportation, and border control. Going back to Mary, Queen of Scots, encryption got her to lose her head. We see that with ransomware, encryption can cause companies, but also countries, to lose their money, their ability to function, and even their diplomatic relations. 20 years ago, no one knew that around the 7th century, some queens in the Maya society were warriors. This changed when archaeologists in Guatemala found a tomb of a royal woman whose name, according to nearby hieroglyphs, was Lady Cabo, also known as Lady Water Lily Hand and Lady Snake Lord. This name also appears on a limestone block showing a Maya queen holding a battle shield. So there's a Maya queen who was also a warrior. Sounds simple enough, but how can we really tell if a figurine from 1500 years ago is a monarch or a warrior? How can we tell their name and even their gender? Sure, Maya civilization had its handwriting and left dozens of carved stones and hieroglyphs, but understanding their story requires exposing pyramids, digging up sarcophagi, deciphering letters and symbols, inscriptions and illustrations, correlating facts, reading limestone blocks, and using any clue that can be found to complete the story. For example, to know a person was a monarch, we should look for gemstones or fine ceramics buried with them, showing their wealth. To know their warriors, we should look for shields or images of them standing on captives. To know their gender, we should try assessing their garment, as archaeologists found that men wore tighter beaded net skirts than women did. This painstaking work of archaeologists is a lot like that of cybersecurity researchers, collecting, reversing, decoding, deobfuscating malware, correlating, analyzing, enriching, pivoting through data to finally understand the attack, its origins, and its targets. And this is exactly what we at Checkpoint Research do every day in order to identify new threats, find ways to block them, and make sure we give our customers the best security they deserve. Queen Elizabeth II, Anne Boleyn, Mary Queen of Scots, Marie Antoinette, her mother Maria Theresa, Queen Beatrice, Queen Bee, Queen Bee. Each queen has her own unique story. Some were kind and altruistic, others evil or just selfish. They had the crown, therefore the power, and could choose whether to use it for good or for bad. Cyber skills present their owners with a similar choice, and at Checkpoint, the queen of cybersecurity, we choose to wear a white crown rather than a black one, to protect rather than attack. Long live Checkpoint Research.